The frost lay heavy on the ground, silvering the bare branches of the oaks that ringed the farmstead. Mary Whitfield tugged her shawl tighter as she stepped into the yard, a wooden bucket swinging from her hand. The air bit at her cheeks, turning her breath into pale mist. Dawn was still a faint promise on the horizon, and the world seemed hushed, as though even the birds feared to stir in the cold. Her boots crunched over the frozen earth as she made her way toward the well. It was her morning ritual, drawing water before the house fully woke, before her mother's voice scolded her for lingering, before her younger brothers and sisters clamored for porridge. But this morning the silence unsettled her. The land had not been safe for months now. Soldiers, sometimes in blue coats, sometimes in red, moved like shadows through the countryside, taking what they needed and leaving ruin behind. The war was never far, even in the stillness of a winter dawn. Mary reached the well, rested the bucket on its stone lip, and began lowering it down with slow turns of the crank. The rope groaned in protest. She leaned over to listen for the faint splash below when she heard it, an unexpected sound that made her heart leap. Cough, ragged and close. She spun around. At first, she saw only the shapes of trees and the pale shimmer of frost. Then from the thicket beyond the well staggered a figure. He was bent, leaning heavily on a branch he used as a staff, his coat torn and stained. His boots were caked with mud, one sole flapping loose. A rag was bound clumsily around his arm, darkened with old blood. Mary's first instinct was to flee. Strangers meant danger, especially in these times. But something in his face stopped her. Though gaunt and drawn with exhaustion, his eyes were fierce, alive with a quiet fire. "Water," he croaked, voice hoarse as though it had not spoken in days. He gestured weakly toward her bucket. "For pity's sake, water." Mary hesitated. The man was clearly no beggar from the village. His bearing, even stooped with pain, suggested something more. Yet his clothes, what remained of them, were little more than rags. He could have been patriot or loyalist, deserter or spy. To give him aid might brand her family traitors in the eyes of one army or the other. Still, she could not turn away from suffering. Carefully, she drew the bucket up from the well and filled the dipper. She held it out, her hand trembling. The stranger grasped it with surprising steadiness. He drank deeply, water spilling over his cracked lips and onto his torn coat. After a moment, he drew a long breath, as though life itself had returned to him. He handed back the dipper and straightened a little. "You've saved me from falling where I stood," he said, his voice stronger now. "God bless you, miss." Mary studied him more closely. His face was unshaven, the shadow of a beard across his jaw, but his features were sharp, dignified. There was command in his tone despite his condition. "You're wounded," she said softly. He glanced at the bandage on his arm, then gave a faint smile. "A scratch. I've seen worse." His eyes shifted toward the woods. "I cannot linger. The patrols are not far behind." The words chilled her. "Patrols? Redcoats?" He nodded once. I slipped them in the night. But they'll search every barn, every thicket. If they find me here, it will bring you no end of trouble." Mary's heart pounded. Already her family struggled under suspicion. Her father had died months earlier, felled not by musket but by fever. Without him, the farm yielded barely enough to keep them through winter. And yet, she could not send this man away to die in the cold. "You need rest," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "And food. There's an old shed yonder, where the tools are kept. No one will look there." The man regarded her with something like gratitude, and something more, a solemn weight. "You risk much." Mary lifted her chin. "If you are who I think you are, sir, then you risked more for all of us." His gaze held hers for a moment, and she sensed the truth of her words. This was no common soldier. There was a bearing about him, a quiet authority that spoke of command. He inclined his head. "Very well. Lead on." Mary guided him across the yard, glancing over her shoulder to be sure her mother had not yet stirred within the house. The shed was little more than a lean-to of rough boards, but it would serve. She fetched an old blanket from the loft, laying it across a pile of straw. The stranger sank down with a groan of relief. His face was pale now, the exertion draining what strength remained. She handed him a crust of bread from her pocket, and he accepted it with murmured thanks. As he ate, Mary dared a question. "Are you one of Washington's men?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then he gave a short nod. "I am. Or was, till the field scattered us. I must reach my company by dawn. They'll be waiting for word. And if you do not, then they may not stand at all." His eyes met hers, and she saw in them the burden of countless lives. Mary drew in a sharp breath. This was no ordinary fugitive. His presence here meant more than danger, it meant choice. To aid him was to take a side, though she had never lifted a musket in her life. At last she said quietly, "Rest here till nightfall. I will keep watch." The man inclined his head again, weariness overtaking him. Within moments, he was asleep on the straw, breath shallow but steady. Mary sat in the shadows of the shed, listening to the distant crackle of frost in the trees, the muffled stirring of her family within the house. Fear pressed against her chest, but alongside it rose something else. Resolve. She had given water to a stranger in rags. By dawn, he might ride forth to muster his men. And if that was so, then perhaps this small act of mercy would ripple far beyond her farm, far beyond her own quiet life. For now, all she could do was wait, and pray that the redcoats did not find their way to her door. The day broke gray and bitter. Thin sunlight seeped through the shutters of the Whitfield home, glinting off frost that clung stubbornly to the fields. Mary's hands shook as she stirred the pot of porridge over the hearth, though she tried to steady them. Her mother moved about the room with her usual briskness, unaware that a stranger lay hidden in the toolshed just beyond the yard. Mary's younger brothers and sisters bickered softly at the table, their chatter a comforting, ordinary sound. Yet to Mary, every scrape of spoon against bowl seemed loud, dangerous. She expected at any moment to hear the pounding of musket butts against the door, redcoat voices demanding entry. Her mother noticed her silence. "You're pale this morning, child. Have you taken ill?" Mary forced a small smile. "Only tired, Mama. The cold robs me of sleep." Her mother clucked her tongue and pressed a hand to Mary's brow. "No fever. Perhaps some fresh air will clear your head." Mary nodded, grateful for the excuse to slip away. She carried a pail toward the yard, pausing only long enough to glance at the shed. Through a crack in the boards she caught sight of the man, still resting, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Relief coursed through her. He had not fled nor perished in the night. She turned back to the path, and her relief evaporated. 3 riders approached from the lane, their scarlet coats stark against the winter fields. The lead soldier carried himself with casual menace, musket resting across his saddle. They were not yet at the farm, but their direction was unmistakable. Mary's heart leapt. She forced herself to keep walking, to appear no more than a farm girl about her chores. When the soldiers reached the yard, the lead man reined in his horse. "You there, girl," he called, his accent clipped. "Seen any travelers pass this way? A deserter, ragged fellow, wounded?" Mary swallowed hard. "No, sir. Only neighbors on their errands. We've little company these days." The soldier studied her a moment, eyes narrowing. Behind him, the other 2 dismounted and began to circle the yard, peering toward the barn and shed. Mary's mind raced. If they opened the shed door, all would be lost. She steadied her voice. "Would you care for water, sir? It's a cold morning, and the well's just filled." The offer brought a pause. The lead soldier sneered but gestured for her to fetch it. Mary hurried to the well, lowering the bucket with deliberate slowness, every turn of the crank giving her time to think. Her palms were slick with sweat despite the cold. When she returned with the dipper, the soldier drank greedily, then wiped his mouth with the back of his glove. See that you keep sharp eyes, girl. This deserter's worth a bounty. He's no common man. The words struck her like a spark. No common man. The soldier confirmed what her instincts had whispered. The ragged stranger was a figure of importance, perhaps a leader whose capture would cripple the Patriot cause. We'll be watching, the soldier added. He swung back into the saddle and spurred his horse toward the road. The other two followed, casting lingering glances at the farm buildings before trotting after him. Mary waited until they were out of sight before releasing the breath she had held. Her knees threatened to give way, but she forced herself upright and returned to the shed. Inside, the man sat propped against the wall, eyes sharp though his body was still weakened. "Redcoats?" he asked quietly. Mary nodded. They were searching. I told them nothing. A flicker of approval crossed his face. "You've courage, miss. More than most." "They said you were no common man," she ventured, voice barely above a whisper. He gave a faint, tired smile. "Perhaps I'm not. But titles matter little when one is hunted like a fox." Mary wanted to press further to know his name, but the weight of secrecy held her tongue. Instead, she fetched a small loaf of bread and a wedge of cheese from the kitchen when her mother was distracted. She smuggled them to the shed, setting them before him. He ate with quiet gratitude. "Between bites," he said, "when darkness falls I must ride. My men wait for word at the crossroads near Powley. If I do not come, they may scatter, and all we've fought for will unravel." Mary's chest tightened. "Then I'll see you safe to the edge of the woods. The soldiers will watch this farm now." The man's gaze softened. "You owe me nothing. To help me is to place yourself in peril." Mary lifted her chin, the same way she had when she first offered him water. "Then let it be peril. I will not let them take you." The man regarded her for a long moment, as though weighing her soul. Last he nodded. "Very well." At dusk, the hours crept by with unbearable slowness. Mary carried on with her chores, gathering firewood, mending linens, tending the hens. All the while, her mind dwelt on the stranger hidden a few steps away. She thought of the soldiers' eyes, the bounty they had mentioned, the danger that pressed close around her family. By afternoon, clouds gathered low and heavy. Snowflakes drifted down, softening the world in silence. Mary welcomed the cover. It would hide their tracks when the time came. Her youngest brother, Thomas, tugged at her sleeve as she returned from the barn. "Mary, why do you keep glancing at the shed? There's nothing in there but rakes and straw." She froze, forcing a laugh. "Only making sure the wind hasn't blown the door open. You know how Mama frets when snow drifts inside." Thomas accepted the answer, but suspicion pricked at Mary. Even her siblings' curiosity could undo them if she was not careful. She resolved to be more discreet, to mask her every glance, every thought. Last dusk fell. The snow thickened, veiling the world in white. Mary slipped out to the shed, her shawl pulled tight, her heart pounding. The man was already on his feet, though he leaned heavily on his makeshift staff. "You should not walk far," she whispered. "I must," he replied. "My men will not wait forever. And if they fall to despair, the cause may falter." Together they crossed the yard, every step tense, every sound magnified in the stillness. At the edge of the woods, the man paused. "You've given me more than water and bread," he said. "You've given me a chance to stand again. Tell me your name, that I may carry it with me." "Mary Whitfield," she whispered. He bowed his head, solemn. "Mary Whitfield, I am in your debt. When dawn comes, if God wills it, you shall hear of us again." Then, with effort, he mounted a small horse tethered in the trees, one she had not noticed before, hidden beneath the pines. He turned toward her once more, eyes burning with resolve. "Pray for us," he said. And with that, he vanished into the snowbound night, leaving Mary alone at the forest's edge, her heart torn between dread and hope. The snow fell steadily through the night, blanketing the farm in silence. Mary lingered near the window of her small room, the faint glow of the hearth behind her. She strained her ears for sounds from the woods. Hoofbeats, voices, anything that might tell her the stranger had escaped safely. But there was nothing, only the hush of winter, broken now and then by the wind's low moan through the eaves. Sleep eluded her. Every creak of the timbers, every shifting shadow set her heart racing. She pictured the redcoats, returning with dogs to sniff out hidden fugitives. She pictured the stranger, his fierce eyes, his weary frame, falling once more into their grasp. At last, near dawn, exhaustion dragged her into restless slumber. She woke to her mother's voice. "Mary, the woodpile's low again. Fetch more before breakfast." Blinking the sleep from her eyes, Mary pulled on her shawl and stepped outside. The air was sharp, stinging her cheeks. As she crossed the yard toward the woodpile, she noticed tracks in the snow. Hoofprints, faint but visible, led from the shed to the tree line. Relief fluttered in her chest. He had ridden out just as he promised. But then her relief faltered. Mixed with the horse's prints were boot marks, many of them. She crouched, brushing the snow aside. These were fresh, pressed hard into the ground. Soldiers had been here. Panic surged through her. She followed the prints toward the woods until her breath came in clouds. At the edge of the trees she paused. The hoofprints veered eastward, but the boots followed, scattered and pressing deep. Had they caught him? A shout startled her. "Girl!" She whirled around. A soldier in scarlet stood only yards away, musket in hand. Two more appeared from the trees behind him. Mary's mind raced. If they questioned her, if they guessed the truth, all would be lost. She forced a wide-eyed look of confusion. "What is it, sir?" The soldier stepped closer, his gaze sharp. "We tracked a rider through the night. He came from this farm. Do you know him?" Mary shook her head quickly. "A rider? At night? We've heard nothing. My brothers would have barked like hounds if anyone passed." The soldier studied her, suspicion plain on his face. But after a tense pause, he spat into the snow. "See that you keep your eyes open, girl. If he returns, you'll have us to answer to." With that, they moved off into the trees, musket barrels glinting faintly in the weak morning light. Mary's knees gave way, and she sank into the snow. Her breath came ragged, but relief mingled with her fear. They had not searched the house. They had not asked further questions. For now she was safe. The rest of the day passed in uneasy quiet. Mary tended to her chores as if nothing were amiss, but her thoughts strayed to the east, where the hoofprints had led. Had the stranger reached his men? Or had the redcoats closed the trap? By evening, her mother noticed her distraction. "You drift like a ghost, child. Is something burdening you?" Mary forced a smile. "Only the cold, Mama. Winter weighs heavy on us all." But when the others slept, she slipped from the house again. Snow crunched under her boots as she followed the faint tracks deeper into the woods. Her shawl clung heavy with frost, and the night air gnawed at her fingers. Still she pressed on. She found the place not far from the old mill stream. A scuffle in the snow, the mark of hooves rearing, boot prints circling. Her heart thudded. This was where they had cornered him. But nearby, half hidden beneath a drift, she found something else. A strip of cloth torn from a coat. Blue wool, frayed and stained. She pressed it to her chest. He had fought here, resisted. And then what? Had he escaped? As she crouched there, a whisper reached her ears. "Miss Whitfield." She started, nearly crying out. From the shadow of a pine stepped the stranger himself, pale and weary but still standing. Snow clung to his coat, and his bandaged arm hung stiff at his side. "Sir!" Relief flooded her, and she clasped the scrap of cloth tighter. "I feared they had taken you." "They nearly did," he said, voice low. "But a friend met me with a fresh horse. The redcoats gave chase, yet we threw them off." His eyes softened. "You should not have come here." "I had to know," she whispered. "To see with my own eyes that you were safe." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the sigh of the wind. Then he stepped closer, his gaze intent. Mary Whitfield, you've risked your home, your family, your very life. Cannot forget it. But I cannot stay either. My men wait at the ridge beyond Powley. They will not hold long without me. Mary's throat tightened. Then let me help you reach them. The roads are watched, but I know the dear paths through these woods. Safer than the open way. He frowned. Too dangerous. If they catch you. They won't, she said fiercely. And if they do, let them question me. I've lied once already and lived. His expression flickered, half admiring, half pained. At last he gave a slow nod. Very well. Led on. They moved together through the snowbound woods, silent as shadows. Mary guided him along narrow trails where the trees grew close, hiding them from the moonlight. The cold bit deep, but she ignored it, focusing only on each careful step. At times he stumbled, breath ragged, yet he pressed forward with grim resolve. Mary supported him when his strength faltered, her arm firm beneath his. Though small of frame, she bore his weight with surprising steadiness. At last they reached a ridge overlooking the valley. Below, faint fires glimmered, campfires shielded as best they could be from watchful eyes. Men moved about them, shadows against the snow. The stranger's face lit with fierce pride. My men. They held fast. Mary's chest swelled with relief. Then you must go to them. He turned to her, solemn. This is where we part, Miss Whitfield. Already you've given me more than I deserve. If they ever speak my name in your hearing, remember it not as a soldier's, but as a man who owed his life to your mercy. Your name, she whispered. For the first time he gave it. Colonel Nathaniel Reed, of the Continental Army. The name struck her like a bell, one she had heard in whispers, spoken by neighbors in awe and in fear. Reed was a leader, a tactician whose men had outfoxed the redcoats more than once. She looked at him, trembling. Then if you fall, the cause falters. He gave a weary smile. Then I must not fall. With that, he gripped her hand, warm, firm, lingering longer than courtesy demanded. Mary Whitfield, you have my eternal gratitude. And then he descended the ridge, his figure swallowed by snow and firelight below. Mary remained at the crest, her heart pounding. Dawn was only hours away, and with it, Colonel Reed would muster his men. She prayed silently, clutching the strip of blue cloth in her hand. Whatever the morrow brought, she knew her life had changed forever. Dawn broke pale and cold, the kind of winter morning when even the light seemed weary. Frost coated every branch, and the ground sparkled as though the earth itself were armored in silver. Mary stood at the edge of the ridge where she had parted from Colonel Reed. Below, the faint glow of fire still burned, and shadows of men stirred restlessly in the snowbound valley. She pulled her shawl tighter, her breath clouding the air. She could not linger long. Her family would soon notice her absence, but her feet refused to carry her home. She had to see. She had to know. From below came a low sound, rising like the stirring of wind through pines. Voices, many of them, uniting in rough cadence. The men were assembling. She saw them forming lines, muskets slung across shoulders, weary yet steady. At their head rode Reed, upright despite his wound, his presence commanding even in his tattered coat. Mary's heart swelled with something she could not name. Pride, fear, perhaps both. He had told her he must not fall, and here he stood, a man restored, ready to lead. She turned back toward the farm, a silent prayer on her lips. Her return was met with questions. "Where have you been, child?" her mother demanded as Mary slipped through the door, cheeks flushed from the cold. "I walked to the ridge for firewood," Mary said quickly. "It gathers thick there where the snow drifts less." Her mother frowned but accepted the answer. The others were too busy with breakfast to press her. Yet unease lingered in the room, as though the very walls felt the weight of secrets. By midday, the rumors had begun. Neighbors passing along the road spoke in hushed tones of skirmishes near Powley, of redcoats repelled by men who rose from the woods at dawn like spirits. Mary listened, her heart racing. Each word painted the picture clearer. Reed had reached his men and they had struck back. But with the rumors came danger. A patrol of British soldiers clattered down the lane, their horses snorting clouds into the frigid air. They stopped at every farmstead, demanding information. When they reached the Whitfield house, Mary's stomach twisted. The officer dismounted, boots crunching on frost. He rapped on the door with his gloved fist. "By order of His Majesty's command, we search for a rebel officer. A man called Reed. Tall dark hair, wounded in the arm. Any sightings will be rewarded handsomely." Mary's mother stiffened. "We are simple farmers, sir. We've seen no such man." The officer's eyes swept the room. His gaze lingered on Mary, narrowing slightly. "And you, girl? You've sharp eyes. Have you seen a stranger pass in these parts?" Mary forced her face into wide-eyed innocence. "Only the neighbors, sir. None others." The officer studied her a long moment, then sneered. "So be it. But mark this. Any who shelter the enemy will be branded as such themselves." He turned on his heel, barking orders. The soldiers rifled through the barn and shed, overturning tools, scattering straw. Mary's blood ran cold as they drew close to the spot where Reed had lain. But the shed was empty now, only shadows and frost. At last, the officer mounted his horse. With a final glare, he spurred his men on, the sound of hooves fading down the lane. Mary sagged against the wall, her breath shaky. Her secret had held barely. That night, the farm lay silent once more. Mary stepped into the yard, staring up at the pale slice of moon. She thought of Reed, somewhere beyond the ridge, perhaps planning his next move, perhaps resting after the day's march. She wondered if he thought of her too, or if she was already just a forgotten kindness in the whirlwind of war. The answer came days later. A messenger arrived at dusk, a young boy riding bareback, cloak whipping in the wind. He stopped at the Whitfield gate, breathless. "Message for Mary Whitfield," he called. Mary stepped forward, heart pounding. The boy handed her a folded scrap of parchment, sealed not with wax but with a simple thread. She broke it open with trembling fingers. "Mary, at dawn you gave water to a man in rags. By that act you gave strength not only to him but to 100 more. We met the enemy at Pauli and stood fast. Know that your courage is stitched into that victory. When freedom is won, it will bear your name in its thread. Nathaniel Reed." Mary read the words again and again, her eyes blurring. She pressed the letter to her chest, feeling its weight as though it were a medal. The weeks that followed were hard. The redcoats tightened their grip on the countryside, searching, punishing, seizing supplies. Yet hope stirred among the people, passed in whispers of Reed's men, of raids that struck swift and vanished into the night. Each rumor carried Mary's thoughts back to the stranger she had sheltered, the man who had looked at her with solemn gratitude before vanishing into the snow. Winter dragged on, bitter and unyielding. But within her burned a quiet fire. She had not carried a musket, had not stood in line at dawn with frost biting her hands. Yet she had chosen. She had given aid when it mattered most, and in doing so had become part of something larger than herself. Spring came at last. The snow melted, fields softened, and life pushed through the thaw. The Whitfield farm struggled as all did, but the earth yielded once more. Mary worked with renewed purpose, her hands rough but her spirit steady. Now and then riders passed, patriots, ragged but resolute. Some spoke of Colonel Reed, of his cunning maneuvers and his refusal to yield. Mary listened quietly, her heart swelling with pride. She never spoke of the night she had helped him, never revealed her secret. But she carried it within her, a flame no winter could extinguish. Years later, long after the war had ended, long after victory was declared and the land called itself free, Mary would look back on that morning at the well. She would remember the frost, the ragged stranger, the dipper of water trembling in her hand. She would remember the weight of choice, the fear, the resolve, the knowledge that a single act could ripple outward and change the tide of lives unseen. She would remember his eyes, fierce and alive even in exhaustion, and the way he had spoken her name as though it mattered. And she would know that in that moment, she had done more than give water to a stranger. She had helped a man muster his strength, and in so doing, had helped a nation muster its own. The war belonged to generals and soldiers, to battles fought in fields and forests. But it also belonged to the quiet, unseen hands that gave water, bread, shelter. To the Mary Whitfields who risked everything for mercy. And though history might never carve her name in marble, though no trumpet would sound her deed, the dawn she witnessed would remain forever hers. The dawn when a man in rags rode forth to muster his men, carrying with him the courage of a farm girl who chose to act.